Welcome to Talk with Ted. It's 4:06 on Tuesday, March 5th, 2019. You're on 1640 K-Talk. Thank you, Kristen. Perry, thank you. And this is Talk with Ted, number 18. I've got to my left a gentleman I met about 5 minutes ago, Luther McDonald, a scientist from up at the University of Utah. And he has already assured me, assuaged my fear, so to speak, that we perhaps are in better shape in dealing with the nuclear meltdown at Fukushima than I thought. And I think that's in part due to him and people like him. And so Luther's here. You're going to meet Luther in the next segment, in the second segment. But first, you're going to hear from me a little bit. This is Talk with Ted. My name is Ted McBride. I'm an attorney from here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and originally from New York. And a shout out to my homies back in New York, as well as some people listening here. It's great to share some things, to have this microphone in front of me that I can share some thoughts. I got my friend Alan Anderson here, and Alan and I are going to be on TV tonight. Right, Alan?
That's right. Woohoo!
We're going to be on Channel 2 with Gephardt. What was his name? The first name? Matt Gephardt, great guy, taking over for his dad. Taking over for Bill, who is quasi-retired, and we just learned from the owner of the Mediterranean deli shop down there on 3900 South and State Street, the best sandwich shop in Salt Lake City. Well, they're neighbors with them, with the Gephardts. And you came under investigation, Alan. They were targeted after you, and I said, come on down, because I've got a story for you, and it's about sober living homes in Sandy, Utah, and the battle that Alan Anderson has headed up against the state of Utah and municipalities throughout the state, including Sandy City, Draper City, West Jordan, West Valley, and Riverdale. And we've got a case against all of them, don't we, Alan?
That's right.
And if you tune into Gephardt tonight, you'll learn a bit about those operations and about what the great state of Utah is doing to interfere with housing throughout the valley. And I hope that people watch that show tonight and take an interest in it, and perhaps a look at themselves, because we were asked questions, Alan, about sober living homes and whether it was a revolving door.
Yeah.
And there's a revolving door here. All right, you go to Pioneer Park.
Right.
It's a revolving door. You go to outside any of the churches downtown on South Temple Street, and the homeless people are all over the place.
Yeah.
And they're fighting us on trying to get housing for them. And then they complain it's a revolving door, so I wonder if they just want them outside. So I'm a little fired up today because of that, and it wasn't my intention to come on the show to speak about that, but I'm going to seize this opportunity to help people understand that that's what's happening on the ground here in Utah. And so you can have all the talk you want about building shelters or providing treatment for people. You got to put your money where your mouth is. And I walked into this studio today, and there was a Wall Street Journal wrapped up in the entranceway, and the headline caught my attention. Opioid maker explores filing for Chapter 11. And this is the Purdue Pharma. This is the big pharmaceutical company that basically, I think, invented or trademarked, whatever they call it. I'm not into that area of the law, but they were the developer of OxyContin. And isn't that great now that they may just file bankruptcy? And meanwhile, we've got people here in Utah that don't want to provide housing for people that are suffering from drug and alcohol addiction. And I think that the folks here in Utah, the leaders, need to take a look at themselves and need to take a look at the people out on the street and maybe just reevaluate some policies and positions that you've taken. That's my rant on sober living homes. It's not what I'm here to talk about, but that's my rant. What am I here to talk about? I'm a skeptic. I've always been a skeptic, and I told Luther that I'm not going to believe a word he says today. He's over here raising his eyebrows at me. He thinks he's smarter than me, and I'm sure he is. You can tell already. But when I was growing up, I wanted to be Luther McDonald. I wanted to to affect. I say grown up. I take that back. When I went to law school, I wanted to be Luther McDonald. I went to Vermont Law School to study environmental law, and I took one class. My second year was water law, and I said, I'm out. It was just way too technical, and there went my dream of being an environmental lawyer. But now I've got the opportunity to be an environmental radio host because I'm going to ask Luther what he's up to. And perhaps this was what I was meant to do, just help explain, because I'm already a bit relieved. But we're coming up on, I think, the 8th anniversary of the Fukushima earthquake. I don't know what to call the earthquake. Did the earthquake have a name? But the gigantic earthquake on March 11th, 2011. And I'm so fascinated with that tsunami, in large part because it's on video. And there's been 3 tsunamis in the last the last 15 years. There was the Boxing Day 2004 tsunami in Indonesia that we're all familiar with that killed, I think, 240,000 people. Then there was this, the Japanese one, I think about 16,000 people died with this tsunami. And then we had that other surprise tsunami from Krakatoa just at Christmas time. And not a lot of video on that one, but a terrible event nonetheless. And I'm just a bit fascinated with tsunamis, and I question whether we should be building things along the coast. It's always bothered me with the storms and the big houses on the Carolina coast, and they get knocked down, and the insurance company just, they pay people and they put them up again. And I just kind of wonder, when are we ever going to learn? And headphones. And that Japan tsunami is so particularly fascinating because it was the giant earthquake, a magnitude 9 earthquake. It knocked the earth off its axis by a certain measurement. And then an hour later, that giant tsunami followed. And it's not one wave, it's basically a series of waves, like layers. And really, for the first time in history, if you've never seen it, you've got to go to YouTube and watch the video of that tsunami coming into shore. It's overwhelming, and we've never seen anything like it. Because if you think back to years ago, I spoke weeks ago about the tsunami in 1755 in Lisbon, Portugal, that wiped out a large part of that city, including 80% of the Catholic churches. And this particular tsunami, we got to watch it come in, and it wasn't just the sneaker wave, and it's the sneaker, not the shoes. I'm not talking hoops, but the one sneaking up on you. And to me, it's just a bit terrifying. And so I've been following Fukushima, TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company's efforts to clean it up. They've brought migrant workers in from the third world to go in there and clean it up. There's issues of forced labor, a whole bunch of issues. And I also question the information that's being shared with us by the International Atomic Agency Commission and others. And am I on, Ellie? You're messing with too many things there. And I'm going to challenge Dr. McDonald about some of those things. And he assures me already that we're perhaps in better hands than I thought. But I'm going to have him convince me wholeheartedly. Do we have that queued up? Before I do that, I'm not going to have time to do 2 things here before the first segment, but there's a thing hanging on a wall in this little radio studio, and it's sparsely decorated by the owner, Dick Perry, including a plaque here about the signing of the Constitution. And I'm going to read that when we come back on after the second segment, but I had such a good show last week, and I was able to play a couple of Rush songs that I thought I'd incorporate a little music here. And we're now going to play the national anthem, sort of a rock and roll version to inspire the show, and hopefully Luther McDonald and we good Americans can help lead the way and resolve maybe this environmental crisis and take care of our planet in a better way. So let's get a little inspiration. It's not Rush, but it's close, and I'll be right back.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed, and the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets trembling, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land under the fray, and the home of the brave? Because we are the brave. Yes, we are the brave. We'll fight you in the name of the brave. We are the US of A. For those unaware, that flag is still there. It's our future to save this land of the brave, the US of A. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free, and the home of the
Welcome back. And so I'm trying to figure if we went over the commercials. I hope Dick is not mad at me. Dick Perry. Have they not come up yet? Oh, okay. So that was a little rock and roll start to the show today, and then we're going to rock and roll into Luther McDonald. I'll be right back. I'm looking him in the eye right now. We're going to make sure he's telling us the truth about Fukushima. Welcome back to Talk with Ted, show about nothing, number 18. I titled it McDonald versus McDonald, Ronald versus Luther, because we're counting on Luther to clean up our mess, and what a mess it is. Back in March 11th of 2011, there was a 9.0 earthquake that struck 80 miles off the coast of Japan. And the nuclear reactor at Fukushima Daiichi, there were, I think, maybe 7 reactors, but units 4, 5, and 6 were operating at the time, and that giant earthquake caused a tsunami that came pouring over the walls. I'm losing my thought, but it came pouring over the walls that weren't built high enough and engulfed the backup diesel generators that were supposed to provide the power for those that plant in the event that the electricity went out, which it did when the earthquake hit. That 50-foot high wave washed over the seawalls, disabled those generators, and it caused the temperatures inside that reactor to go up to 5,000 degrees. That resulted in sort of almost what you're not old enough, Luther, but I think of the China syndrome, where it's going to melt through to the core of the earth. And I think that this is probably the closest that we've ever come. I don't have you on yet, so you don't have to answer. But before, in my mind, it's the closest we've ever come to the China syndrome. Unit 3 in particular is where they have the major problem, and there's a plan there to clean up that mess. And it's going to cost, according to an article I'm looking at, $76 billion, and it's going to take 40 years. 40. So I don't know if I'll be around to see that completion, hopefully. Now, there's others that say it's going to take 60 years. But we're coming up on the anniversary of it, the 8th anniversary. There was actually some news today because they were finally able to get a robot in there just a couple of weeks ago. Well, they've been struggling to get a robot in there, and the radiation was so strong it was destroying the equipment. So they had to sort of reinvent a robot and a small one and guide it down into the water through a maze of tangled steel. And they know the route. I think they now have like containers built, almost like a tunnel through to make it easier so they're not navigating a little floating robot every time. But the first few robots that went down, they were basically destroyed by the radiation. And now they got one, and it was just on February 15th that they touched that material for the first time. And because they got a robot down there, it's called a Scorpion, and it's a 24-inch robot. And I've got some questions from Dr. McDonald about what they found down there and what we're going to do with that. So with that introduction, Dr. Luther McDonald, how are you?
I'm doing great, Ted. How are you?
Good. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, it's a blast to be here.
You make me feel old.
Oh, I hope we don't do that.
Just looking at you. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 30.
30 now.
Yeah.
Now, you caught my, you're a scientist
I am.
at the University of Utah.
Correct. I teach nuclear engineering there.
I think I dropped that class too. At what level do you teach nuclear engineering?
I teach it at every level. So I teach it from the undergraduate level, so primarily juniors and seniors. And so I teach an undergraduate radiochemistry class right now where we talk about a lot of these things to understand the benefits of radiation, not just the harms of it.
So I'm mistaken.
Oh,
Go
yeah.
Go ahead.
Radiation can be wonderful for you at the end of the day as well.
I got my brother-in-law's a radiologist.
Yeah.
That helps us, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So it helps us with imaging quite a bit. The treatments that we can do to the body because of radiation are quite miraculous nowadays.
And yet it can kill us too.
Absolutely.
Because this is the World Health Report that I've got 114 pages of it. So I've got some questions for you. And I know you're not a doctor.
No, definitely not a medical doctor.
And when I started prepping for this show, I thought I've got kind of two angles. I've got an engineering angle, engineering kind of science, and then a medical angle.
Okay.
Okay. I'm a bit concerned about the health risks of it, as well as the cleanup. And I'm hoping that you can help not eliminate my fear, but give us some assurances and really what do we need to do? Because I feel like the world's a bit complacent and this particular garbage pile scares me.
Yeah, no problem at all. There's lots of things we can do to make it better.
Now, I'm great at not letting people finish in their answers. Undergrad, you just told me that. What else do you
Yeah,
teach?
I do undergraduate and I teach all the way up to the PhD level. So I
And you're
have
29 years old, 30 years
30
old?
now, yeah.
Do you know, I was always amazed. Alan Dershowitz, the great lawyer,
Yes.
he was a law professor at Harvard when he was like 28 years old.
That's awesome.
He got out of law school and started teaching it.
Yeah.
That's you, isn't it?
That's what I did. I mean, I started at the U when I was 25. So
Just that? Did you get your PhD at 25?
I did. So
And what's your PhD in exactly?
My PhD is in environmental radiochemistry. So I specialize in what happens to radioactive materials, typically in the environment.
Now, it's interesting, that word chemistry, okay, that scares me and rings a bell because I always think in court, I can help people explain most things in court, not chemistry.
Well, so in chemistry, especially in a court setting, we have to rely very heavily on statistics.
And even then, oh, interesting.
Yes.
I was about to answer the question. Statistics, to break it down,
Yes.
to dumb it down for us.
Not to dumb it down for you, but...
I don't mean that pejoratively.
No, but to give analysis for what is the deviation within our answer. You know, do we know with 99% confidence this is what occurred? Or do we know with 90% confidence this
Now,
is
I'm
what
a
occurred?
philosopher. I don't think that we know anything with 100% certainty.
Oh, we certainly don't. But we can know things with 99% certainty, or we can approach knowing things at 100% certainty.
I'm going to test you.
If we can do the experiments over and over and over and over an infinite number of times.
You got me before I could test you. Now he's raising his eyebrows at me. I think I've met my match here. Okay, great. Amazing stuff. I'm very ill-informed about some of this stuff.
Okay, well, I hope to inform you.
Tell you that, but I'm fascinated with it.
Okay.
3 Mile Island when I was a kid in Pennsylvania, right? That was a big deal. Then when I was in college, it was Chernobyl.
Yes.
We have in New York, there's the Indian Point nuclear reactor on the Hudson River, just about 30 miles up from New York City. And of course, they worry about that with terrorism and such, right? I've looked at Chernobyl, the sort of lost city of Chernobyl in the Ukraine. And so I'm worried about sort of long term that devil getting out of that ground in Fukushima and spreading around the world, as well as the utility of those places that have been hit hard by that direct exposure, Chernobyl, Fukushima. And I know in Fukushima they've got cherry trees blossoming.
Oh, sure.
It's kind of coming back maybe slowly, right?
Well, I don't know what you mean by what's coming back.
That's a good question. So now I'm ahead of myself again. Let's go back. Let's back up and talk about you. I talk too much. That's amazing, Luther. Straight out of your PhD and you turn around and teach.
Yeah, pretty much. I had about 6 months in which I did a postdoc, so it's kind of like a residency for a medical doctor, but for a PhD. Okay. And I did that at Pacific Northwest National Lab, or the Hanford site.
So let's back up. I've taken a deposition of a lot of expert witnesses. Right? Hopefully he's on my side, this guy. Where'd you grow up?
Pensacola, Florida.
Pensacola, Florida.
Northwest, right on almost the Alabama border.
What year did you graduate high school?
2006.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
You graduated high school in 2006.
Absolutely.
And when did you know you were going to get into this field?
I knew that I was going to do chemistry within a couple years of doing my undergraduate degree. I had a fantastic undergraduate teacher in general chemistry, and just kind of made me have a love for it. My real dream was I was going to be an anesthesiologist, not because I really wanted to do anything, but because I heard they made a lot of money.
You're not weird enough to be an anesthesiologist. They're all the same.
Absolutely. So in studying chemistry at the undergraduate level, I got an internship to go up to Pacific Northwest National Lab, or the Hanford site in Washington. And that was really
the Hanford site.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, now it makes sense to me, because I said you went to school in Washington.
Absolutely.
What tell us what college?
So I went to Washington State University up there.
Okay. What city is that? Is that Olympia?
It's in Pullman, Washington.
Pullman.
So all the way on the East Coast on the Idaho border.
And is that way out where the Hanford is it?
So Hanford is in central Washington, which is located in Richland, Washington. And so it's kind of in the middle. So Hanford would be in between Pullman and Seattle, about midway in the state of Washington.
And is that where there was the principal development of the nuclear technology for the bomb at World War II?
Correct. Well, it was one of the sites. There were 3 sites for developing the weapon. So Tennessee was one, Oak Ridge, and then the third one was Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Los Alamos.
Correct.
Naturally, where they detonated the first bomb, I think.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep. So Hanford is where they made the plutonium for the weapons.
Okay. I'm going to have some questions for you about the development of this, because, World War II, really World War I and World War II, in my view, were a race to who could get the biggest gun. It was the technological race to who could get the biggest gun. And the Germans got to start with the tanks.
Right.
And then we know that they were developing the heavy water up in, where was it, Norway or Sweden, right? They were looking to develop the bomb, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so I'm going to ask you about that processing of the heavy water and that nuclear material. But before we get to that, let's go back to your, I'm just blown away that you're teaching immediately after you get your PhD. But you did 4 years at Washington?
I was at Washington State about 4 years, so just under 4 years in total.
Okay. And the name of that professor, you got a name drop here.
Sure. I worked for Sue Clark at Washington State University.
Sue Clark. Okay. Good. You had a good female leader guiding you.
Oh, Sue was fantastic. She's one of the best in the field.
Do you still work with her, or do you work with her now?
Absolutely. I still call her and ask her for advice.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Is she calling you?
Sometimes she calls me.
I bet she does.
But I greatly appreciate Sue, and I rely on her feedback quite a bit.
Okay. Where'd you do your post-grad studies?
I did that at Hanford site. That's
Okay.
where I did a lot of my studies there.
So the degree also came from
So the degree came from Washington State University, and then kind of my residency or my postdoc was done at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory.
What did you do there?
So there I studied environmental actinides. And so I was looking at uranium behaviors and with different soil microbes actually at the time.
I'm already lost.
Yeah, it was fun. So basically we wanted to understand what can attach to uranium in the environment. You know, is uranium going to be there as its natural uranium state, which it's almost always present as an oxide, so it's uranium with 2 oxygens attached to it? Or is something else going to come along that's naturally in the dirt and try to latch onto that uranium? That's what we were trying to study.
Fascinating. Now, I have in my mind's eye a picture of inside that facility, that giant wall. Do you know what I'm talking about?
At Fukushima now?
No, at in Washington.
I have no idea what wall you're talking
then
about.
I'm not
in
good. Then
Washington.
I have no question for you. That's incredible stuff. When did you start up at the U?
I've been here since January 2014.
January 2014, and you came here because of the snow?
No, I came here for the job, actually.
See, you're better than me. I came here for the snow.
I mean, I learned to ski on water. So skiing on frozen water is a bit different.
Yes, it is. And I don't like to ski on water. My Uncle Peter nearly killed me when I was a kid. Do you ski now?
I try to ski maybe once or twice a year. I'm not great at it. Growing up, we'd ski on the East Coast every now and then up in West Virginia. But
ski in West Virginia?
Yeah.
Really?
The black diamonds in West Virginia, though, are like your greens out here, man.
Yeah.
That's a little risky.
Yeah, well, I grew up skiing in New York and in Vermont where it's skiing on ice. The snow was
yeah.
blue, and the temperature was 40 below.
Certainly.
All right, so it's a little different here. Personal note, are you married?
I have a partner, domestic partner. Been together
Excellent.
about 5 years.
Awesome. I like to hear that. That's great. Good for you. And do you enjoy Utah?
I do. I love Utah. Utah's got a little bit of everything for you, and so you can have the city life, you can have the outdoor life. I work at a world-class university, so it's
Yes, you do.
pretty much I have the dream job and the dream place to have it.
Plan on going anywhere anytime soon?
No, I don't.
Good. Good. Let's talk just a little bit. We'll kind of scratch the surface here. Let's first talk about the Fukushima itself, okay? I struggle with the fact that we built humanity, built a nuclear reactor on the beach.
Don't know that I would label it as a beach that we built it on.
Next to the ocean.
We built it next to the ocean. And if you look at the majority of our industrial facilities throughout the world, whether it's an oil refinery or anything of that nature.
You're going to say it's a whole collection of mistakes? We just made one more mistake?
But every single one of them are built where there's a source of water because we have to have cooling. And so at the end of the day, these major facilities go towards water.
So does it matter if it's the ocean or the Mississippi River?
Well, the Mississippi River could flood just like an ocean can cause a tsunami.
That's kind of what I'm saying, right?
Right. So at the end of the day,
Necessary evil. It's got to be
you do
built.
the best for planning for the worst case scenario. You honestly do. And the reality is there's always going to be something worse than you could ever imagine.
Isn't that the truth? Yikes! You just scared me. I thought you were here to make me feel good.
Well, I'm going to make you feel good, but I'm also here to be honest with you.
Yep.
We can't plan for everything that could ever possibly happen, but we do the best that we can for planning what we know could happen, and then from there we just have to learn.
So let me back up. Just lay a little more groundwork. So you're looking at Fukushima from that scientific perspective, and I look at it from kind of a social perspective because there's all kinds of things going on there that are troubling.
Yeah.
Including, I don't know if you call it forced labor, but it may well be from desperate parts of the world where they're putting those white jumpsuits on poor people and having them go in and clean it up.
So that's all you. I know nothing about that. If that's the case,
yep,
I've heard nothing of it.
Then what they've done there, they've gone through that town. A lot of that town is paved over, and they've also gone through and taken up a lot of the dirt and put it into bags.
Correct.
And those bags are stacked high all over the place.
Well, what do you mean by all over the place? They're stacked high in a waste site where they're planned on going to a long-term repository.
And we're going to get to that. Is there a permanent long-term repository in the world?
Yes.
Permanent?
Yes. So one was just opened in Norway within the past 2 years.
And that's the one we were just talking about.
Correct.
And that's really the first permanent storage place.
Well, we also have long-term permanent storage in the United States. And so the most common one that people have heard of is Yucca Mountain. No waste has gone to Yucca Mountain to date. But along with that, we also have the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, or WIPP, WIPP, which is located in New Mexico. and waste is already being stored in New Mexico from nuclear.
Okay. Back to me. Politically, Yucca Mountain's not open.
It's not.
And that's a legal issue, a state issue. Nobody wants it in their backyard.
Exactly.
Like some other things. Good start, Luther. You got me on my heels, which is good. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's Talk with Ted. My timing is right now. I don't know. I jumped into commercials because you didn't click on the no commercials were running out. They let me down, dude. It is 4:45 on Tuesday, March 5th, and boy, isn't it nice to have a little spring in the air.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Right?
I've been looking forward to this for a bit.
Everybody does. The winter's tough. And it's a little gray out there now. Not quite yet drive time. And it's a bit warmer, but it's nice out there. We got to get out and do some skiing before the snow melts and the spring is here and we're playing golf. Are you a golfer, Luther?
You know, I golfed when I lived in Florida. I haven't golfed since moving to Utah.
There's great golf in Utah.
I've heard.
Great golf in Utah. We'll have to get out. Do you know Professor Amos Giora up at the U Law School?
I don't.
Okay, we're going to have to. I wonder if he's a golfer.
I don't
Are you a
think
jazz
so.
fan? You like hoops?
I do like hoops as well.
Okay. I just got you both work for the same outfit up there, that University of Utah.
Yeah, there's a lot of us, though.
Yeah, how many people work up at the U? Do you know?
I honestly have no idea.
It's like a little city in and of itself.
Absolutely.
You know, just about every trial I do in Salt Lake City, there's always a professor from the U on the jury. So I know I always got one I can count on. But really, almost every time. But we've got you here today exclusively. Did you work today?
I did.
What were you working on today?
I actually got off work a little early just so I could be here with you.
I hope that's not disrupting anything.
No, it's not. So I taught 2 classes this morning. So I taught the undergraduate radiochemistry class, and then I'm teaching a graduate class called Nuclear Environmental Engineering. And so I had both of those this morning, and then in the afternoon I was working a little bit on a proposal. So
proposal. What was the proposal?
So the proposal is to make medical isotopes in a reactor up at Idaho National Laboratory. And so we're looking at new cancer treating basically materials that can be used to target isotope or target cancer more specifically.
Wow.
I was not doing that today. That's pretty amazing. You're a really lucky guy.
Yeah, I am. I mean,
because that's incredibly meaningful work.
Yeah. We just hope that it works.
But forget that for a second. A lot of people, you know, you go to work every day, you get up, you go to work, people talk about, you know, you want that job, you want that dream, that job that matters. You've got it, dude.
Absolutely. I have my dream job. And, you know, the great thing is that if I come up with a crazy idea, I've just got to write a proposal and find someone to pay me to do it.
There you go. And you look like you're full of crazy ideas.
So many.
See, how did I know? I tell you, I'm just a little bit kind of blown away. What were you teaching this morning? I want to be in your class. Dumb something down for me.
Sure. So I was teaching how do we detect radiation. So basically, if we have something we know it's radioactive, how do we identify what that is? You know, you look
Geiger counter?
Well, so a Geiger counter will tell you it's radioactive, but it doesn't tell you what it is.
Because it's only measuring what?
It's only measuring radioactivity. So basically, it's measuring gas that's being ionized within the detector, which any radiation could be producing.
Is the radiation a gas? Is that what you just told me?
No, the detector is a gas.
Oh. The radiation is a particle.
The radiation is a particle that interacts with that gas, creates some type of current, and that's how we know that radiation is there. So if we had a Geiger counter in this room right now, it would be telling us that there's radiation present, because there is.
It's coming from the sun too, right?
It's coming from the sun. It's everywhere. Yeah.
How come it's not killing us?
Because it's natural. We are always exposed to certain amounts of radiation in our daily lives. If you have any type of natural stone around you, there is some type of uranium or thorium in it, and that is radioactive. And so, you know, if we look at the health organizations, you mentioned WHO earlier, the World Health Organization, they put out limits for what people are normally exposed to just based off of natural background radiation. And then beyond that, we start looking at, okay, when do health impacts start occurring if you start getting more radiation than the natural background levels?
So let me cut you off right there. How many times do I have to go through the airport security checkpoint before I have to worry?
None. There's no radiation in that.
Some people think there is.
No, those are microwaves.
Microwaves.
Yes.
No problem.
No, none at all.
I'm not going to get cooked.
No.
What if I sat in it for an hour?
Yeah, you'd be fine. You'd be dumb,
Okay.
but you'd be fine.
I think some people think that there's some sort of risk there going through the airport.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people are uninformed about what radiation is, the benefits of radiation, and then when do we truly need to be concerned about it.
And that's why you're sitting right there. And so let's start with that, what it is, right? Is that where you...
Sure. So, I mean, if you want, I would like to take you through where radiation comes from and what we
Thank
do
you for
with
taking
it.
over my radio show.
All right.
Go ahead, ask yourself the questions and give us the answers.
Sure. So whenever I describe nuclear to anybody, especially in a class setting, I tell them we go from Earth to Earth. At the end of the day, we've got to get the uranium from the Earth. It is part of the dirt. It's going to be part of some type of ore. Think of like a copper ore, like we have lots of those in Utah. Well, there's uranium ores. Well, we've got to go and dig up that uranium from that ore.
There are uranium is here in Utah,
Absolutely.
down in Moab. Don't they have the uranium
Correct.
down in
Yeah,
Moab?
and there's a whole bunch of it right along the Colorado border as well.
Yep.
And so the entire
That's where the
south.
deposit is, down there.
Correct. There's a lot of different uranium ores within the Southwest. And then if we were to look
Is that
at...
from the old Bonneville?
Oh, I have no idea what it's from.
Gotcha. You're not the geologist.
Yeah, I'm
We'll
not a
pull somebody
geologist.
else out of the game. Go ahead, continue.
You know, and if we were to look
Ignore
at thorium, thorium, that's primarily coming from Idaho. There are huge reserves up in Idaho of thorium.
me. Is that where what's the name of the place in
Idaho National Laboratory is located
Is it
up
near
there?
Near the mining of it, or not
The
necessarily?
mining is probably spread all throughout the state. It's going to be in lots of different places. But so we're going Earth to Earth. We get this uranium, we dig it out, but then we have to clean it up. So basically, we want to get rid of all of the other minerals or elements that were
I'm
present
going
with
to
that
cut you
uranium.
off right there. When
Yeah.
you say clean it up, are we talking about the tailings at the mining or the spent fuel?
So the tailings are what's left over after we clean it up.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have the pure uranium, and then we never get 100% purity. You reminded me of that earlier. So that little bit of impurity that's left over, a little bit of uranium that we didn't get out of the dirt, that's what goes in the tailings.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Gotcha.
So we've cleaned up that uranium, but now we've got to put it in the form that we can use it for nuclear power.
So we're going to make it into pellets.
Correct. And so this is exactly what would have been at Fukushima, would have been a uranium with 2 oxygens attached to it. It's called a uranium dioxide fuel pellet that we essentially made. All right. And they're pretty small. So if you have like old number 2 pencil,
It's like a
they're about the size
Tootsie
of an
Roll,
eraser
isn't
on
it?
that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really, really, really small at the end of the day. Okay.
Yep.
So that material goes into our power reactor, and this is where we let the fission occur. So the fission is where we're splitting that uranium apart, and as we do that, we're releasing a ton of energy.
And what starts the fission, though? Is it just the critical amount of that material together that it automatically starts to do what? How do we get that from the ground where I'm walking by it and it's okay to suddenly it's now heating water?
So a lot of times we got to have some type of a neutron source to kickstart our reaction. And then once we kickstart that reaction, it goes until we stop it. So a lot of times we'll start up a reactor, we'll kickstart it with some type of neutron emitting source. And then once that reaction gets going, really our job in the power reactor is just to maintain that reaction at whatever steady level we want for power production.
Okay,
And
so
so maybe that's a gigawatt of electricity.
Okay. So let's back up a little bit. When they first were able to kind of split that atom, you say, it's in our control and we can stop it. They weren't sure whether it would just have the cascading effect of splitting every atom on Earth, right?
Well, so that would be if we were to do nuclear fusion. We were worried about if we started a chain reaction of fusing things together like what happens on the sun. We were worried that would be a chain reaction that we weren't going to be able to stop. We knew that fission was going to stop as soon as we ran out of fuel.
The math figured that out?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then what about the fusion then? Where do we stand with that?
Fusion is always 30 years out. In 30 years, it'll probably be 30 years out. But that's my personal opinion. I hope that we get to fusion one day. Fusion is a very challenging thing relative to fission. It's
Why?
much harder to make that a chain reaction that will continuously go on.
And why would we even be searching for the opportunity to create that energy through fusion versus fission?
So fusion would be an unlimited source of power. And it's an unlimited source of power that has no carbon emissions, really has very little side effects associated with it whatsoever. And the scale of it is huge. And so in terms of energy potential for electricity, it's kind of the holy grail. If you could get to it, basically you're taking the sun and you're harvesting the sun's energy directly here on Earth.
By replicating it, or you're talking about tapping into the light here?
No, not tapping into the light. It's not a solar cell.
It's replicating.
It's replicating what's happening on the sun in terms of producing massive amounts of heat on the sun.
Now, this was before I got here, but wasn't there something at the University of Utah back in maybe the 70s or the 80s about cold fusion?
Yeah, that was before my time as well.
Understood.
Yeah.
And they took a little bit of a hit on the chin, a reputation with that, right?
Correct.
I don't know much about it, but just ringing a little bit of a bell with me. I find it ironic that you're here. Maybe you were going to redeem humanity as well as the University of Utah. Right?
Well, I would say the University of Utah has absolutely redeemed itself.
Yeah, Keith Van Horn did that. You don't know, basketball player in the 1980s or the 1990s. I'm kidding you. I love hoops, but I'm not. The University of Utah is awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but they just said that little. Wouldn't that be great if you were able to do something like that? Or now you're not working on the fusion project.
No. That's a whole separate field of science.
Who's working on that?
I have no idea.
Okay, gonna have to have them on next.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're not the guy we wanted, Luther. We need the.
Sorry, I actually don't know if we have a lot of fusion experts in Utah. We might, but we don't have them at least in nuclear engineering at the University of Utah.
Okay.
All right, so let's get back to our
go ahead.
fuel
Ask
cycle.
me my next question that you're going to
get you
answer.
back on track,
Yep,
man.
You do. I'm lost.
All right.
Yep.
So we made our uranium pellets. We put it in our power reactor. We produced power from it. After we've done
By
that,
boiling water and steam,
Yes,
turning
absolutely.
no different than burning coal.
exactly. The only difference is we're not releasing any CO2 in the process.
Understood.
Okay.
But we've got that radioactive waste.
We've got that radioactive waste, which is absolutely true. But if we were to take the entire volume of radioactive waste from the U.S., it would fit into one football field. It doesn't take a lot of uranium to produce the electricity that we get from it. Now, the waste is hazardous. The waste is radioactive. It is dangerous, so we have to do something with it. So right now, that waste sits in spent nuclear fuel pools or giant pools of water where it physically cools off because it's incredibly hot to handle when it comes out of a power reactor. Once it has cooled off for 5 to 10 years, then
You must have to keep adding water to that, right? Is it it's evaporating like crazy?
For sure.
Yep.
For sure. And so after that cools off, then you put it into concrete canisters. And those concrete canisters are wrapped in stainless steel. And that stainless steel is wrapped in stainless steel. And then it's put in more concrete, and then it can sit in those canisters for about 50 years. And right now they're looking at even extending the license beyond 50 years because, well, we've looked at them and we say, hey, nothing has changed in 50 years of this material sitting here.
It's working.
It's working.
And where are those scattered throughout the country? These containers?
There's not too many places that they're scattered throughout, but there's a few facilities in which this material is sitting. Yes. Now,
I'm going to interrupt you again with this third question, but go ahead. I do it to him.
Well, I was going to say that's on the option that we are going to store the fuel and not recycle it. I think we should recycle it.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I've got an issue about recycling because I think it encourages us to consume too much, but I'm going to make this the exception. And recycle the spent nuclear fuel. Feel good about ourselves. We got the top of the hour break. Talk with Ted. I've got Luther McDonald. We'll be right back. Welcome back. My name is Ted McBride. I am an attorney here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and this is Talk with Ted, a show about nothing, number 18. And I've got Ronald McDonald versus Luther McDonald. And Ronald didn't have the nerve to show up today, so we're just dealing with just Luther. But before I tap him back in, it is the top of the hour. It's 5:08. It's drive time, quitting time. So we probably got some people on the road. And I'm going to do a little public service announcement for my friend Alan Anderson. Alan helps me on the radio here. He's my sound guy. He's also he really helps me kind of being a little bouncing things off of so I don't feel like I'm here all alone. And we're on the radio right now, but we're going to be on TV tonight. We're going to be on Channel 2. We had Gephardt here, Matt Gephardt.
I believe, yeah.
Great guy, Matt Gephardt. And he had his sights on Alan.
That's right.
And we met with him. He was great. And we think that he has now got his sights properly focused on Sandy City.
That's right.
In connection with sober living homes and what we claim are efforts to interfere with the opening and operation of homes. Think about that. Your home. And we've been fighting that fight for a number of years and welcomed the opportunity to have KUTV interview us so that it could be accurately reported. And I am confident that it will be. So tune in tonight, and we're going to be on TV. But right now we're on the radio. And I've got with me a guy that's got a face for TV, but I got him on the radio. That's Luther McDonald. And I'm intimidated by this young man. But I'm also happy that we've got him. And Luther, before I segue back into you, I'm a skeptic, dude. I look at some of the things that we've set up. Recycling, it's a wonderful thing, but if we're counting on it too much, maybe we should just conserve instead of count on recycle. And I'm not asking for anything yet. This is just a little bit of philosophy. Recycling, I also think, represents us reusing our garbage. And in some fundamental sense, I think we're better than that, than reusing our garbage. And I also think that it can give us a sense of complacency. The same with a Tesla. And if you knew what the environmental impact of building a Tesla and the materials that need to be extracted from the earth to, he's writing notes here like he's going to challenge me. He just looked at me like I didn't know what I was talking about. But that's why I've got him here, because I want him to, I don't want him to make us more complacent, though, and that's what I fear that we are. But I worry about Tesla, that it's not the solution. You're talking fusion. That, to me, resonated. That fusion. That's the solution, isn't it? No waste, energy with no waste. Isn't that what you said?
Well, it's a possibility. There's a small amount of waste with it. But if we look at recycling nuclear, it's not the sense of recycling that you're thinking. We're not.
I understand that.
For starters.
Now, hang on. No, for starters, I got to clarify because I'm not going to let you hammer me with that one. It's different than plastic because you're talking about taking it from a dangerous state back into its natural state.
Correct.
And you can't do that with plastic. You can't turn plastic back into its compound materials, or can you?
You absolutely can.
Then are we recycling all the plastic? Well, why don't we? Are we eliminating the plastic?
We're not eliminating it, but we're reusing it. So
I know
we're not
reusing
generating
it.
more of it.
I know we're
and
reusing
to say
it.
that, oh man, you kind of hurt me when you said I think we're better than reusing it. Come on.
I do. I don't think we should use more of it than we need to in the first place. And I think it encourages us to use more. That's my only point. Okay. Is recycling inherently good? Absolutely.
Well, good. We can agree on that.
Absolutely. But I'm just saying it can't be, that doesn't mean we can be complacent and that just be the answer. And so I just like to point out, that sort of devil in it, if you will.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I agree. All because we're recycling doesn't mean we should be consuming more of it. We should recycle and try to consume less as we can.
I'm just afraid that that's not encouraged. But let's get on point and talk about you and not my nutty theories because it's not reality. You were talking to us about dirt.
Yes. Well, so if we go back and we talk about our waste coming out of the reactor, there's two things that we can do with it. One is we can put it back in the earth where we have to store it for a long time, or we can recycle it. So the key with that is 95% of what comes out of your power reactor can be reused again.
Reused again. So when you say recycle, you're talking about putting it back in to boil the water again.
Correct. Absolutely. Which means only 5% of the material that we burned up in the reactor actually has to go to a waste facility.
5%.
Absolutely.
So is that happening now?
So it's happening in other countries, but not in the U.S.
No, I'm talking in the world. We're all
Yes.
one. Is it happening now in the world?
So in France. France is actually one of the leaders for reprocessing of spent nuclear fuel.
Now, are you going to tell me that it's near the particle collider?
No, but my first student who graduated from me works at the particle collider.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us what the particle collider is for the folks that
Well,
don't
so
know.
the particle collider is a high-energy cyclotron, which basically we're trying to shoot particles and hit them into each other at very high energies to study what are the subatomic things that make up our basic particles. So I'll go a little bit geeky on you. We have protons, neutrons, and electrons. There are things that can make up those particles that are even smaller than them. And so we're trying to understand if we collide them and break them up. Yeah, quarks exist.
Quarks, yeah.
But I'll tell you, I'm not a particle physicist, so don't
Oh, I
question me
got
on
you
any of
there
this.
then, huh? You see that?
Score for
Alan?
Ted.
Yeah. 10
job,
points for that one. Cool. Keep going.
Okay. So that's, pretty much what the accelerator and the cyclotron is about. So with the waste, we can either put that 5% in the ground if we recycle everything else, or we put 100% of it in the ground. Right now, we're going with the 100% strategy going into the
Now,
ground.
hang on. You keep using it around and around, all 100% is going to end up in the ground at some point. If you're telling me that 5% gets used up, so you recycle it, there goes another 5 back in the ground, recycle it again, another 5 back in the ground.
Oh, sure.
It'll all be back in the ground.
At some point, but that's why it's Earth to Earth and our
And then
nuclear fuel cycle.
will it be radioactive then?
It will be a lot less radioactive after we've recycled the
Because
majority
you're just
of it.
burning it all out?
Absolutely.
I like this guy.
Yeah.
It's like burning wood and charcoal. Is that right?
Yeah, sure. You can put it in that.
What does your buddy do at the particle collider?
Christina, my first student, and so when she was working out there, she was on the simulation side, so trying to model some of the effects that would be happening from a physics perspective. She was way smarter than I ever was, which is
I
a
like
good
how you
thing.
said that.
You like it when your students are smarter than you.
Yeah. Yep. That what's that particle? I can't think of the name of it. The particle collider?
The God particle.
No.
No.
In any event, it's
starts
in
with an
France
H, I
and it's
remember
also
it.
in
It's in France and Switzerland. It crosses the border between them.
And what it was European consolidation to study nuclear materials basically in the 1940s. Is how it originated.
Yes, but it's been going on since then, and they've been expanding it. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into it pretty much every year so that we can study more and more.
I think that town, there's 14,000 scientists that live in that town from around the world.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. It's got to be the smartest place on earth.
Well, it's got to be a pretty geeky place on Earth.
That's
but
true, too. You're not a Rush fan by chance, are you?
No.
You're too young. You would have been a Rush fan in the 80s.
Right.
Wow. Okay, back to here. Where were you? Ask yourself your next question and give us your next answer, if you would.
Well, so we've gone through the fuel cycle now. So basically, you've made your power with it. You can put it all back in the earth as it is without recycling it, or you can recycle it, burn it up as much as possible.
When are
and
we
then
going to be
put
doing that here?
remaining.
When are we going to be recycling that the fuel rod material here?
I hope soon. We've been doing a lot of research as a country in terms of recycling that spent nuclear fuel, but right now it's mostly a political issue for actually taking it to the point of doing the recycling.
And why is that? Because nobody wants it in their backyard? Or?
Exactly.
Oh,
Well,
the
nobody
old
wants
not
it in their
my
backyard.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other good reason other than that?
There are concerns out there about it being a safeguard risk. And so one of them being that, well, if you're recycling this material, you're recovering pure nuclear material. We don't want that getting into the wrong hands, which is a legitimate concern
Sure.
because you don't want the spread of nuclear weapons across the world. But at the same time, I think we're pretty good about protecting things in the United States. So if we were to do it, there's not too much risk of it getting out of our hands.
I'd like to think that way with you too. So we agree on that one. Now you said they're doing it in France, but then you had a little hiccup about the technology here. So that I thought, well, that it can't be a technological problem because they'd certainly be willing to share that technology with us, right?
We invented the technology
Okay,
initially.
so it's just a location problem.
So it was location and politics.
Not in my
I mean,
backyard.
At the end of the day, I mean, there's kind of three things at play. So there's the social aspect, which you're very good at. There's the science aspect, and then there's the economic aspect as well.
Ah, the driving force of everything.
Yes.
I say in my business, there's one truth in my business: money.
Oh, absolutely.
If there's a financial incentive, people will do it.
Yep. And right now, it's too cheap to go up and dig up new uranium. So it's not economical to recycle it.
Simple as that. Isn't that a shame? That's a topic for a different day. Wow, this thing's got tentacles. Okay, so now we've got the dirt. We've recycled it. I'm not sure if I understand it. The light hasn't gone on here, but I'm trying. What do you got next?
Well, so at that point, we've put it back into the earth. And so we get
Storage.
everything storage, absolutely.
Okay.
And so in the U.S., that would most likely be Yucca Mountain. Yucca Mountain was built for the storage, though no waste has gone there.
And that's in Nevada?
Correct.
And wasn't there also one in New Mexico?
Correct. There's the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, or WIP, which is in New Mexico.
Okay.
And WIP has taken some waste, though not commercial waste. It's been waste from defense applications that we've had.
And now we've got a little bit of storage here in Utah. It's not the high-level radioactive waste, but we've got low-level radioactive waste storage here in Utah.
Certainly. So mostly depleted uranium, from what I understand, is what's being stored.
At an EnviroCare, and I'm talking at more like the medical waste, X-ray waste and stuff, it's stored out at Energy Solutions.
Correct. I know of Energy Solutions in the depleted uranium.
It is the depleted uranium there at Energy Solutions. We're talking about the same thing?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Continue then.
In terms of the medical waste, I'm not as familiar with the storage of where those
Okay, I
options
think
are
they
for
might
that.
do some of that at EnviroCare too. But tell us, what do you know about EnviroCare? It's out here in the desert, in the West Desert in Utah?
This is the first I've heard of EnviroCare, to be honest.
Okay. What's your understanding then of the storage that we do here in Utah? Or did you just describe
So
it for
my
me?
understanding of any of the storage, there's a lot of regulatory agencies that are involved in it. And if you get permission to store it, it will be safe.
Is there big money in it?
There's going to be jobs that are associated with initially putting it there, and then jobs in terms of monitoring the material once it goes there. But pretty much once you put it in the ground, you don't have to do much with it.
Okay. And I'm just thinking we need a financial incentive to get it in the ground.
Well, I'm sure that someone's going to be paying to put it here.
Yeah.
So there is going to be money that's coming in from that
Yeah,
perspective.
and it should be good money, and they should put it here
Absolutely.
because you need to have financial incentive. Nothing's going to grow if there's no financial incentive in this world.
Certainly.
That includes a sober living home. That the owners are critical at making a profit. You can't make a profit. That's what they say. So, watch the news tonight. Be right back. Welcome back to Luther Talks to Himself, because I'm not. I give up. Ted McBride on 1640 K-Talk Radio. First, a shout out to my buddies over at Miller Harrison. I had Peter Harrison on a few weeks ago, HOA lawyer here in town, and he's partners with Mike Miller and Doug Shumway and Tyler Lamar. Great HOA lawyers located on 3rd South and in between West Temple and Main Street, I think it is. Best HOA lawyers in town. Visit those guys, and they need to get down here to the studio and record a commercial for us. And we'll have that hopefully in a week or so. But today we've got Luther McDonald, and Luther's a scientist up at the University of Utah. He started teaching PhD courses before he was done completing them, the way I hear it, which is just staggering to me. I'm going to say it again. Alan Dershowitz taught at Harvard right after he graduated. He was so good, they hired him to teach as soon as he got done. He hadn't even been out doing anything yet. And so Luther reminds me of Alan Dershowitz, a much more valuable version, hopefully, because Alan Dershowitz just a lawyer, of course.
Right. No comment.
Somebody's got to lose, right? So, Luther, you're telling us about, I never know if it's Yucca or Yucca Mountain. I want to call it Yucca Mountain.
Yucca Mountain. So Yucca Mountain is where we're going to take all of the waste from our power reactors. We're going to put it into an incredibly stable form. So this is where getting into what do we do with that physical waste? How do we actually store it? Right now, a lot of the plans is to turn it into a glass log. So it's a process called vitrification. So we take it to very high temperatures with something like silica, turn it into glass, and then that glass is incredibly stable. And so that glass can take the heat from the waste, it can take the radioactive decay from the waste, and basically we put it into these stainless steel canisters or some other incredibly solid canisters, put them into Yucca Mountain.
Well, the glass is the first barrier?
The glass is so you have
Or
the
is-
glass, and then the glass is surrounded by stainless steel, or you might have concrete surrounding the glass.
But I'm confused already. Is the glass, that the material that's being buried, you've converted into a glass?
Absolutely.
It's not a glass container.
No, it's not a glass
That's
container.
what I'm saying.
You've
It
converted
is-
it into glass. It
Wow.
is glass by itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not like glass on your window that you can take a hammer to and break. You could hit this glass and nothing is going to happen to it.
And we have that now?
We do.
And it's in that form now?
Well, it's not in that form stored in the canisters that I talked about before right
Okay.
now. The temporary storage for 50 years,
Yep.
it's not in a glass form in those.
Okay.
It would go from those, get turned into the glass, and then we would put it back into concrete canisters wrapped in stainless steel, wrapped in more stainless steel, which then go into Yucca Mountain.
And then Tell me, how does that conversion of it from dirt to glass, like physically, how does that make it less dangerous? Because you're not converting it into that material for no reason at all,
No,
right?
absolutely. So basically, when you go into a long-term repository, you're trying to have multiple levels of barrier to prevent it from ever leaving that environment that you put it in. And so your first barrier is going to be your stainless steel canister. And let's say that stainless steel canister might last for several thousand years before it actually breaks. If it's in an environment that has no water, it will last quite a long time.
How long is quite a long time?
Several thousand years.
Perfect. Okay.
If it does have water there, then it could fail sooner.
Sure.
And that's just because metal rust. We know that if we look at it.
Yep.
All right. But then you have your concrete barrier within that. Well, it's going to take even more time for that to break. Then if that breaks, eventually you have your glass barrier. Well, that glass barrier is going to take even longer to break. And then beyond that glass barrier, you have the repository itself, which is an environment designed for holding that waste. So at Yucca Mountain, the soil is called volcanic tuff. And the nice thing about that volcanic tuff is that it's several 100 million years old and it hasn't gone anywhere for quite a long time. So if the material eventually gets to the point of breaking within that, we know it's not going to go anywhere.
So you got the geologist working with you on that part.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And then, you're hardly old enough, but Yucca Mountain's been around for a long time.
Oh, yes, before me.
In the news for a long time.
Yes.
I don't recall when it started. It used to be in the news quite a bit.
Yes.
And now it's really not in the news at all.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that's what I fear about this Fukushima, too, that it's not in the news enough.
Okay, so
That's kind of what I...
Right. So at Fukushima, it was a horrible incident. There's no doubt about that. It was catastrophic. It was a worst case scenario for a nuclear power plant. It's what we absolutely want
And
to
so
never
let's
happen.
run through that real quick, and then we'll go to where you want to go next. Make a note what's in your mind right
No,
now, because
I'm
I'm
good.
going to interrupt you. And so you've got the nuclear power plant, and the energy comes from regular electricity.
Correct.
Okay, and then it had backup diesel generators. Take it from there.
Okay.
What are those protections to keep the power on?
Okay, so at your power facility, the key with it is having something to cool your reactor core. You have to keep it constantly cooled, and that's a source of
I
water.
need a pump.
Correct. You need a pump that's going to be operating, sending in cooler water.
And that's what the electricity is for, the pump.
Correct.
More
So-
than anything.
Absolutely. So the electricity was allowing that water to get pumped in. All right. When the earthquake happened, all of the reactors shut themselves off like they were designed to do. That was perfect how the systems
Yeah,
operated.
and in fact, the earthquake shut them off, right? Is that what you just said?
Well, the earthquake didn't shut them off, but it was an automatic
Or-
system that followed the earthquake
Perfect,
that shut them
perfect,
off.
yep.
Okay. But that doesn't stop the heat from your power reactor. Remember how I said the spent fuel has to be stored in pools for 5 to 10 years to cool off?
So I'm just going to stop you right there. So when you say that they're off, that means that those rods are submerged in the water?
Correct. They were submerged in the water when the reactor was operating, but no more fission reactions are occurring.
How do they do that?
So they basically put in what's called a neutron poison
Oh,
or
yeah,
a neutron
the
sponge.
polarizing.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they basically have these control rods, which are sponges. They suck up all the neutrons and they kill the reaction. And so they basically drop those into the reactor, and as soon as they do that, it shuts down the fission process that's occurring.
It's still in the water, obviously. It's always in the water.
It's always in the water. Yes, these control rods are always covered with the water. Okay. All right? But all because you stopped the fission process doesn't mean the heat has gone away. So you've still got to cool off while the heat is being generated because the rods are just physically hot at the end of the day. All right? So the earthquake came in, shut off power, and then at that point in time, the backup generators kicked on. And the backup generators then started introducing the water to the reactors to cool it off.
And those are the diesel generators.
Those are the diesel generators. And that lasted for about 45 minutes.
Here comes the wave.
And then the waves came in.
The wave took an hour.
Correct.
Yep.
And then as the waves came in, that's when the waves went over the barrier wall or the seawall, which was only built at 5.5 meters. And the actual, I work in meters a lot as a scientist. So 5.5 meters, we're
20.
looking at 15, 16 feet. All right.
I was going to say 20. Little one.
Yeah, close to 20 though. Okay, so that barrier worked for about the first 4 to 5 minutes of the tsunami waves coming in, but then eventually the bigger waves came in to the point that they got
layers.
up to 40 feet.
Yeah.
And at 40 feet, they were well over the seawalls that were there.
Now I'm going to stop you right there. I've watched just about every video that exists on YouTube of that wave. and I've read about it. I'm really intrigued with it. There's one town, one village, where the mayor in the 1970s, there was a tsunami in the 1940s, and this mayor was very concerned about the tsunami, and he built a wall better than 4 or 5 meters, and it was the only place that didn't get swallowed up by the tsunami.
That's fantastic.
Isn't that something? And so all that standard where everybody's thinking this is high enough, this is high enough, this is high enough. There was one guy that had some history, and he said higher, and sure enough, that's the one little harbor town or whatever that survived. So they knew to build a wall higher, and they didn't.
Right. Well, it
And
comes
that's
back
because of
to our
money.
dirty little word, economics.
Money, right?
Okay. Because you have a risk probability associated with it,
Yep.
and you assign within that risk, what's the amount of money I'm willing to spend.
And everybody thinks, okay, if it's a 1 in 400 year event, day one is today. I got 400 years,
Right.
right?
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody, we think like that. Oh, it's a 1 in 400 year.
Right.
Year one.
So our diesel generators got taken out, and at that point, we no longer had electricity at the site for pumping and cooling to reactor cores 1 through 3.
Okay, but there's a backup to the backup.
There was. So they actually brought in fire trucks, and they were using fire trucks to pump in water into the coolants as well.
There's another backup.
Oh, go for it. Maybe you know more.
I do. There's a mechanical system
Okay.
that is based on gravity, and there was something about that mechanical system that would cool it in the event of even a total electrical loss. But there was something about that mechanical system that was also not functioning.
Okay.
I believe that's true.
I mean, it would make sense. Within the nuclear industry, we have backup for backup for backup.
And
for
are there
backup
some that are
for backup.
gravity based?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so at the point that they could no longer cool these reactor cores, that's when they started getting too hot, and eventually to the point that all of the water had boiled off so that it was either steam that was within the reactor vessels themselves. So that's a very high pressure vessel now. And so that's looking for leaks to try to get out. Or in the event that that happens, you get so hot that you start converting the water and making hydrogen gas. And it was the hydrogen gas that
Kaboom.
actually caused the explosion
Kaboom.
at Fukushima.
Okay. Amazing.
Yes.
Um,
So when that happened, there was a lot of release of radionuclides that did physically occur at the Fukushima site. All right. Now, if you'll let me, I want to put it in context,
No,
though, how
no,
much
no
was
context.
actually released.
No context.
Okay?
I
So-
don't want to get complacent about it. You're
No, no,
supposed
no.
to come in and
I-
alarm us so
Yes,
we
okay.
do something about it.
And you should be alarmed, because these were dangerous that were released. In an ideal world, none of this would have ever been released. But I do want to put it in context for what was the true activity relative to what we physically have in the Pacific Ocean already.
Thank you. That's what I want to know.
Okay. So the big thing that you heard about being released was iodine. Everybody was terrified about their thyroids
I
because,
think it reached California.
well,
It's in the ocean.
so
You taught me something.
So
It's in the ocean already.
It's in the ocean. All right. Stable iodine could have reached the California coast, and a little bit of radioactive iodine would have. In radioactivity, there's this term that we call the half-life, and that's how long it takes for that material, for half of it, to go away. All right. The half-life of the iodine isotope at Fukushima was 8 days.
That's it.
That's it.
Not 8,000 years.
Not 8,000
Like I
years.
thought.
8 days. So that means generally after 10 half-lives, that material is pretty much back down to background levels within the environment.
By the time I got to California.
It was pretty close to background levels within the environment.
Fascinating.
Now, we have very sensitive detection techniques, so we can always detect it. But all because we can detect it doesn't mean it's harmful. We're just really good in the laboratory at detecting things. Okay? So, they threw out some really big numbers in terms of describing what was the activity that was released from Fukushima. Okay, so for example, some of the numbers that you'll see published, and this is from the International Atomic Energy Agency. I know you have your doubts about
I'm skeptical
them.
of
Okay?
those people. I know government people. Mark Shurtleff worked for the government. We know he's no good.
So the way they described the iodine that was released is they said that there was, on the high end, 400 petabecquerels of radioactivity that was released. So peta, 10 to the 15th. Nobody even works in peta. You might have heard it in terms of like petaflops, thinking about a
Nope.
computer in terms of size.
Nope.
It's a ridiculously large number to describe it in. Okay, 400 is the amount that was released, though, for the iodine. The amount of uranium naturally existing in the Pacific Ocean is 20 million petaflops.
Then why are they building an ice wall around it to currently.
Because we don't want to release more. All right? And so at this point in time, all of that iodine is gone. We're not worried about that. All right? But we still have the spent fuel, which is sitting there, and that spent fuel wasn't released to the environment. There were a few things that were released to the environment, not all of them. So everything else that is still the spent fuel that is there is still radioactive. It's not naturally occurring in the environment, so we don't want to just release it to the Pacific Ocean. So what we're working on now is,
What
like you
happened
said,
if we did? Let's say we just opened the gates there, released it all. Would it kill the world?
it would not kill the world. We would be able to recover from something like this. It would be horrible, though, still, at the end of the day. And so basically, you're introducing new things in the Pacific Ocean, and we don't know what the chain effect is going to be from those. Even though the total amount of them might be small, that small amount of them might be enough to get rid of some species in the ocean because it consumes whatever that is. And because that's now radioactive, that's going to create health impacts for that species.
So uncertain what effect it could possibly have on our biological cycle, all the whole world.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And, modeling at the world scale is nearly impossible. So, you know what I mean? There's no way of predicting what the outcome would be of something like that.
Before you dive back to your notes, that plant then, I'm not sure, I don't think any of it's operational. I could be wrong. But, no, I lost my train of thought. That's what happens at 5:38. Struggling here. You got me off track here, Luther. Go ahead, ask yourself the next question.
No. So if we're looking at this waste, something has to be done
now
with
I know,
it.
but
Okay.
go ahead.
So they have the glass wall that's in right now, which is pretty much preventing it from interacting with the seawater.
That's what I was going to ask you. It's an ice wall, they call it.
Yes.
And that is dug down into the ground, 100 or 150 feet?
Quite a bit.
And it boxes in. It's a three-sided box.
Correct.
Right? And as I understand it, they're trying to be cautious about catching the groundwater running off under the plant and then into the ocean.
Correct.
Why are we doing that? And what the heck is this ice wall thing?
So the ice wall is just basically serving as a barrier to stop that waste that we have there from making it into the ocean. All right? But instead of putting in concrete, because we couldn't really put in concrete, it had already been put in, we already had the disaster that occurred. So there's no going in and filling it in with concrete. So basically we froze the ground. And by freezing the ground, well, you freeze any liquid that interacts with it. You prevent that liquid from then getting into the Pacific Ocean.
That's amazing. Oh, wow. Is this the first time that technology was used?
To my knowledge, yes. I'm sure it's been used on smaller scales before, but probably not at this size.
Amazing. And they did that a couple of years ago? 3 or 4 years ago, I think?
They did it pretty shortly after it happened. It may have been more like 5 or 6 years ago that they actually did it.
Okay. What is the great challenge there? Is it retrieving the material so that you can place it into something? Is that it? Just picking it up?
Yep. So at the end of the day, all of that material is going to have to go to a repository like we talked about before. But they've got to figure out how to get it out to convert it into the glass logs to go to that repository.
Okay, and I know we're never going to understand that in the last 20-minute segment here, but I'll take your word for that, Luther. Ted McBride on Talk with Ted will be back with the last segment of a fascinating interview with University of Utah scientist Luther McDonald. Welcome back to the final segment of Talk with Ted. We've got about 13 minutes left with Luther McDonald, and I feel better already. I think we can get him out of here, Alan. If you just
got more good news, Ted.
Oh, I stepped out. Hopefully there is some more good news because that's what I came here for. I need it. Because I tell you, Luther, as take a little break here. Well, let me set up. We're in the final segment. It's Talk with Ted on 1640K Talk. The AM radio, Salt Lake City, you can't beat it. It's a great thing. And then we use the internet afterwards to kind of have a few more people listen to it. But I just love being on live radio out here in Utah. And if we were recording this in somebody's living room on some podcast, it wouldn't be the same because there's people driving by right now that want to hear more from Luther McDonald. But I want to tell you already that I reached 2 conclusions from this interview. And, that's bad of me to reach a conclusion before we're done. But these are my impressions at this point, I'll say. You're right about the economic incentive. And I think that from a social standpoint, we've got to make sure that we've got economic incentive in the right place. Because I don't think we have it in the right place in too many places. And then I know my personal experience. You may not know this, Luther, but I stopped watching television 6 months ago. And I do a radio show with Mark Shurtleff on Thursday afternoons about political stuff. And I try to look at as little of it as I can because it's very manipulative, the news. And I think that it's marketing, basically. And it's fear-driven. And they've scared me about Fukushima.
I think they've scared everybody about Fukushima. And this is where I also blame us as scientists at the end of the day, because we publish reports on the scientific findings, but a lot of those published reports aren't open access. They're published in our science journals, and we write them with so much technical jargon that you would not enjoy reading them.
Well, I'll tell you what I do read, though, is the reports from the Economic Atomic Age, or the
IAEA.
The International Atomic Energy Association.
Agency.
I knew I was off on that. But I read those reports and I'm skeptical because they don't tell me much of anything. And month after month, they say that the test results are not as bad as they thought.
Yes, and that's absolutely
That gives me
true.
no context.
Okay.
But you're telling me this because I can't possibly understand it without getting a
No,
PhD?
you can understand it. And so let me put it in this perspective. The worst from Fukushima has occurred.
Are you 99.99999% confident?
I have 3 sigma confidence in this. 99.9%.
3 sigma. I'm good with that. I'm going to sleep tonight. It doesn't get better than that.
So I really do have that level of confidence that we are putting the infrastructure in place. What has been released has been released. There isn't any more that is going to be released. Now, the 40-year cycle that you talked about, that is cleaning up what is left behind to make sure that no more is released, but we have to do that in a safe approach. We can't just send people in instantly and try to clean it up because
no one can get near it.
Exactly. So we've got to make sure that we do it with the proper safety protocols so that no one gets hurt in the process of remediating that waste. But we've also got to make sure that we do it as fast as we can, which is on the order of 40 years, so that we can clean up that site and so that nothing else is put into the environment.
Okay, and so that's the best case scenario? Give me the worst case scenario.
The worst
that you're able to fathom.
Well, I mean, the worst case scenario would be another 50-foot wall tsunami hitting it.
Okay.
That would be a horrible situation.
And why? What could happen then with this? And if you're repeating, remember there's people tuning in that may not have heard you earlier. So I've been concerned about that. Fukushima Daiichi that got hit on March 11th, 2011. We're coming up on the anniversary. They've built the new walls. They've got the ice wall. We're trying to contain it. What happens if it gets unleashed?
If it gets unleashed, you're going to release radioactivity to the environment, additional material than was released with the initial fallout from the disaster that occurred. Now, is it so much activity that it's going to create adverse health effects for the entire population of the world? Absolutely not.
Worst case scenario, you're telling me absolutely not?
Correct.
Great.
We can go home now.
But I don't live in a worst case scenario situation. I realize it can happen, but I'm much more optimistic than that. Yes, I'm a scientist. Yep. So I do have great confidence that we're going to have the best case scenario, which actually pulls through because we're relying on science, we're investing in it, and we're not cutting any short avenues in cleaning up this waste. We're giving it everything we got.
Are we giving it enough economic incentive?
Yes.
What about the technologies that you deal with? Are they well enough funded?
Well, I mean, I would always love more funding because it supports more research, more PhD students, and I love to do research. But that said, we are well supported in terms of our funding. So I'm not going to bash anyone.
Fair enough. In your field that you deal with, what do you think is the single most important issue where if you had to pick one and say the funding needs to go to this, or is that too vague? Or you just...
Well, I think the most important thing we got to keep in mind is a well-rounded cycle from the sense of it all starts with student development. If you want new technology in 20 years, you've got to be paying to train the student now. Because in 20 years, that person who is at their 20-year mark in their career is retiring. They're not developing that new technology. So if you're only investing in that technology that's ready to go to the market now, well, then you're leaving behind what's going to be the next technology coming along.
Are you a gamer?
No, I'm not.
Do you know that they're having in 2020 in Japan? They're having a competition for robots, for robot development.
Awesome.
And they're inviting like gamers from around the world because they've got a research center that they've built near there to help develop these products and invent these things that we need to go pick up that garbage.
I think that's fantastic.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
And they say they want to invite the kids with the tattoos and the.
Hey, now I got tattoos as well, man.
There you go. See, you're 30 years old.
I would
Come on.
never guess that.
Give us a break. This is his disguise, his little flannel shirt, right? Wow.
Did I ease some of your fears?
You
Ted?
really did.
Good.
Because especially, the Yucca Mountain, I never know what it is. It seems stalled out economically.
Yes, and I would agree with that.
And then we are, we're stand out here in the real world and look at each other like, what are we doing?
Right. There's a big
Seems like
thing-
nobody's in charge of it sometimes.
Yes. Within nuclear power, at least, we talk about this a lot in my nuclear environmental engineering course. We are producing waste. It should be our responsibility to deal with the waste from the energy we are consuming now. But we have a
Are you
culture...
dividing us up by country in your mind?
No,
You're
no,
talking
no.
we, humanity.
Well, I'm talking we, humanity. We have a culture of consume, and then saying, oh, well, the next generation will figure out what to do with the waste.
And I think we've done that. Humanity's done that for a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it would be great if we would deal with our own waste, regardless of whether it's nuclear, whether it's carbon, whether it's rare earth minerals going into your batteries. We should be dealing with our own waste.
Agreed. How do you feel about electric cars and Tesla and that kind of thing? I mean, I know it's, well, I won't say what I think. How do you think? You probably got a Tesla out there.
No, actually, I don't. I don't even have a car, actually. And
Why
so
not?
I walk to work most days.
How'd
It's
you
quite
get down
wonderful.
here?
I took a lift down here. Still had to take a car.
I'll give you a ride home. How's that?
No, you're good. So there's pros and cons to all of the technology. So if you look at the battery development that's being done for them, a lot of them is based off of rare earth elements. Okay, those rare earth elements are the same thing that's produced in nuclear waste.
Really?
Absolutely. Now, in nuclear waste, they are radioactive, which is one part of the toxicity. But even without the radioactive nature, they are still heavy metals that are very highly toxic. So at some point, that battery has to either be recycled or disposed of, and that is heavy metal waste that has to be disposed of. So there is still waste associated with it at the end of the day.
So are we dealing with the same thing with Tesla and electric cars as we are with the radioactive waste, that where we haven't yet developed the technologies to recycle some of those metals, or is that different? Or maybe we
Well-
have the technology and just not the financial incentive to do it yet.
That's it right there.
Aha, it's always the money.
Correct.
It's always the money.
And I'll also let again, driving your electric car is great because then your car is not burning gas and it's not putting CO2 in the atmosphere. But if you plug your car in at home to charge it, that electricity has to come from
Oh,
somewhere.
I know that.
And if that electricity is coming from a coal-powered or a coal-powered plant, well, you're still putting CO2 in the atmosphere by charging your car. You've just shifted where the CO2 is coming from. Before it was the gasoline from driving your car. Now it's from the electricity because you plugged it in.
Now, we haven't opened a nuclear plant in the United States in your lifetime. It's been the 1970s since the last one was commissioned. Do you believe in nuclear energy?
I do. I absolutely do. But I also believe in a well-rounded energy portfolio. I don't believe that nuclear is the only answer.
It's awfully high in France. It's like 80-90%.
Absolutely. And there are situations where nuclear is the best solution for us to pursue. But there are other options where you might have a lot of sun and you might not need a lot of energy. In that situation, solar makes perfect sense. Or you might be somewhere where there's a lot of wind. And again, you don't need high density energy. Wind turbines.
Give me an example. Explain that.
So
high-density energy.
if we think about like the Midwest and farming towns, all right, you don't have major urban centers. And if you don't have a major urban center, you don't have a high electricity demand for a very small concentrated area. You have a relatively low distributed energy demand.
Perfectly understood. You dumbed that one down enough for me to understand. Maybe the only thing I understand
Right.
today.
But
Okay.
if you want to power a major urban center, that's going to be very tough to do with solar or wind by themselves. And so in that instance, you're going to have a very large source of electricity on the gigawatt scale. And if you're looking at that, well, then you're looking at your oil, your natural gas, or your nuclear. And in that instance, I would say you should pick nuclear.
What about firewood? You skipped the firewood.
Hey,
Now
I
you're
love
in Park
a
City,
wood
too.
burning fire stove.
I do
but
too. Yeah. And we need fusion, is what I'm hearing.
I hope that we get there one day. I really do. I'm not smart enough to understand it.
No, but you're teaching those kids.
I'm teaching them fission.
Then they're going to teach the next generation. Somebody's going to take the fission and turn it to the fusion.
Yeah, hopefully.
Absolutely incredible. So what are the stat? We're almost out of time. I'm going to jump ahead. I saw an amazing thing on television the other day with the Polynesians, and they're basically self-sustaining and using nature, the eels, luring the eels up onto the beach to then help, I forget what it was, draw the food or clean up something. Are you harvesting nature to help? Because you think science and it's against nature, but you're looking at nature.
I mean, I
Are
would
you-
say every source of power we have, even if we're looking at oil or natural gas, is harvesting nature. We're just, if we're looking at, producing oil, well, we're just harvesting carbon from a different place in the environment, converting it from whatever it is into the oil that we're burning.
Right.
So we're harvesting nature no matter what we do.
And I'm talking about to clean it, to convert it from. Is there any way to accelerate? I'm sure the answer is no.
No. First law of thermodynamics.
There's no way to accelerate. Oh, really? I just learned something. I just
Always
failed that
skip- always
class.
skip that class.
There's no way to accelerate it.
No.
Kind of like the speed of light has a limit.
Correct.
Fascinating. Speed of sound have a limit?
Man, you're going physics on me.
I'm not so sure the speed of sound has a limit.
It's not.
It's affected by our atmosphere,
Right.
unlike the light.
Right.
Yep. What do you have on the horizon, Luther? Tell us something good.
Well, so I'm doing a lot of work right now looking at nuclear materials. So whether we're looking at new nuclear fuels that can't melt down and cause the accident that happened at Fukushima. So basically,
New fuels.
so if the worst case situation occurs where we lose coolant, can we make our fuel out of something that isn't going to cause hydrogen to be produced and potentially to have an explosion? Because then we're creating what we call accident-tolerant fuels.
Explain that for me. What accident are you avoiding? The explosion?
The explosion. So you lose your coolant going into your reactor. That's what happened in Fukushima. That's how the disaster started. We can lose our coolant with these accident-tolerant fuels, and nothing will happen. That's the
Nothing.
goal.
Wow. That's promising.
I'm speechless. Luther, thank you.
No problem. It was
You're
fun.
terrific. I was waiting for you. I needed that today. Talk with Ted, episode 18 complete. I hope everybody is feeling better after hearing from Luther McDonald and the great things we've got going on here in the state of Utah. And we need people like Luther, more people like him, and financial incentive to get the good minds in the right spot.
Whether it's for weight loss,
I really
blood
enjoyed the show
sugar control,
today.
or
Thanks,
just overall
folks.
health,
I'll be back on
millions of people have
Thursday
been
with
helped
Mark
by
Shurtleff.
low-carb diets.
Drive safe.
Also